to Conservation Conversations. This is the final installment in our series that leads up to the Manchester Folk Festival 2026. And I'm thrilled to have you all back, especially to welcome one of the most special guests that I've had to date. It's a real ending the season on a high point. We've come right to the end, and obviously Manchester Folk Festival is this Thursday. It starts on Thursday, runs through to Saturday. If you haven't got your ticket yet, please grab them now. The other thing I'll say before I welcome in our wonderful guest is if you're tuning into this right now live, you're not following the instructions that I've been giving all season, which of course is to tune in live 17th of March to the Folk Album of the Year Award at the Rochdale Town Hall. They're running it right now, and I've just been watching some of it on the YouTube stream. But I'm prioritizing recording one final installment for the Conservation Conversations. Now, we're recording and they are recording, so you can pick which one to tune in to live. But if you do pick the Rochdale Town Hall one, you're in for a treat. They have some really amazing performances going on right now. They're hearing from Edith from Zimbabwe, who's a fantastic example of folk music from outside of Britain, although much of the other music that's been nominated is British music. So whatever your flavor, tune in to the Folk Album of the Year Award, either live right now if you want to jump across, or catch up their recording after. And if you do jump across, come back and see our recording after. So there you got your choice. Either way, see you at Manchester Folk Festival in a couple of days' time, hopefully. And my band Stornoway, who are hosting this, are playing at the Royal Albert Hall at the end of this month. So there's a lot of music to choose from, lots of live music to choose from. Come and see us. I think tickets are pretty much sold out though. So yeah, I don't know what to advise on that front. If you haven't got one, it's worth checking the website, the venue's website, just in case. Now, before I natter on too much, I'm going to invite my very special guest in. She's one of the most fascinating musicians I've encountered, and I'll allow her to tell her own story. But as an introduction, I'll say it includes roles in the Merchant Navy. It includes being a crofter on the Western Isles of Scotland and handling snowstorms pretty much constantly through the winter. I'll be asking her about her trips to the Isle of Wight and to Stornoway itself. Without further ado, my very special guest, Chloe Matharu. Welcome, Chloe. How are you doing?
Hi there. Good evening, folks. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure, and really nice to meet you digitally. I hope we get to meet in person, probably at the Manchester Folk Festival this weekend. I know It's a very busy itinerary, right? Have you just got the one show, or you've got a lot of few things going on?
Yeah, so I'm catching the ferry off of Isle of Lewis, which is where I'm based, tomorrow. So it's a really early start. And then I'm picking up a new harp in Cardiff before I bring it up to the English Folk Expo on Friday. And then I'm playing the Manchester Folk Festival. I've got one set, and that's at 3 p.m. on in the Victoria Wood Room. So if you know the festival, that's where it is.
On Saturday, 21st?
Yeah, that's right.
Brilliant. Okay, I really hope to be there. And yeah, harpist would be a role that does entail a lot of logistics, I suppose. So you're picking up your instrument. You have to get harps repaired fairly often, I suppose.
Yeah, so I moved into this croft house last summer, and I think that just the difference in humidity, it's been really damp. It's created a buzz on my harp. So they're swapping, Kamak harps are swapping the harp for one that I can have on loan for the festival, which is really helpful whilst they fix it.
Excellent. Yeah. What was the name you mentioned there? Kamak harps?
Kamak harps.
Yeah. That's a brand who has endorsed you and gives you harp assistance, right?
I'm not endorsed actually, but they are really supportive, and so they are based in France, and you can hire the harps abroad. So when I tour internationally in Australia, I always use a Kamak harp as well.
That's great. And the harp is such a special sound, a clean sound, ideally. So even that smallest buzz, I know must be you must need to get rid of that. The history of harps in my band, Stornoway, and we'll get to talking about the two Stornoways shortly. But we've had guest harpists from time to time, and it's just one of the most enchanting, beautiful extra layers that haunts our music. And I wish we could have a full-time harpist in our band, really. Although I've been too terrified to try learn it, because that's years of work, isn't it?
I think if you can play the piano, you could probably give the harp a shot.
Great. Okay. Yeah. And maybe it is a little bit more portable than the piano, I suppose. So maybe
Yeah,
I'll give it.
definitely.
Oh, for St. Patrick's Night tonight, I'll be heading out to my local Irish bar, and they usually have a harpist sitting in the session. So maybe with your encouragement there and a bit of inspiration later, if I see someone playing the right kind of instrument and the right tunes, maybe I'll bite the bullet, grab myself a harp. I'd like to, briefly talk about what it's like there on the Isle of Lewis. We've toured there a couple of times because we're called Stornoway. We made sure we wanted to pay homage to the original place, and the residents seemed to welcome us. They brought us all a round of drinks and had a great time. One of them was the Heb Celt Festival, and then once was just on under our own steam to play a show. But what's the music scene like there at the moment?
Yeah, it's brilliant. Well, I'm playing Heb Celt this year, so I'm quite excited to go. I've been before and it's great crack. And I just think, it's one of these places, it's kind of like Ireland, where you go out and you're speaking to people and they're a musician. And so everyone is at a level of musicianship, which they could be professional if they wanted to be. So it's quite intimidating, I think, to go out and try and perform professionally, because I just think there's so much culture here that just any person can play. But that being said, it's also so rich in culture, in musical culture, that you could just learn so much from the sessions and also the the performances and things. So there's always music going on, and there's at least 2 recording studios that I know of on the island. So the fact that we are an island and we're isolated, the fact that you can choose where you want to go and record music is also really fantastic.
That's fantastic. I wanted to ask briefly about shanties, because I think one of the breakthrough shanties of our time, the Wellerman, was recorded on an island not too far from you. Was it actually on Lewis? Do you know?
Off the top of my head, I'm actually not sure. Despite being in the Merchant Navy, I wouldn't say that my forte is sea shanty.
Okay.
So I do know the song that you're talking about and the band you're talking about, but
Yes.
I don't really listen to them that much, but I do respect them. So
yeah, I have a feeling it was Nathan Evans who broke through with that #1 track during the lockdowns of 2020, and I have a feeling it was somewhere on North Lewis that he was based.
It might be the same one. Then I recorded recently at the Wee Studio, and that's in Ness, which is at the butt of Lewis, which is probably the most northern part of Isle of Lewis.
Right. Oh, it was a phase or a fad in folk that I would have been interested to sort of jump into and get involved with, but Stornoway had been broken up at that time for 3 years, and we didn't get back together for at least another couple of years. We were on this at the time, what felt to us like a permanent breakup, but it turned out to just be a hiatus. But we've sung a shanty from time to time. We've written our own shanties as well. So maybe one of the bucket list items for us is to get back up there and maybe sing the Wellerman in the place that made it famous. But you mentioned the Merchant Navy there, so tell us a bit about your time in the Merchant Navy. You started as a navigational officer in the Dover Ferry, is that correct?
Yeah, so I left school and did music for a wee bit, and I was part of a kind of trio, Lauren McCall and Ian McPherson, doing really a lot of 1960s folk revival stuff. And then it got to a point where I just felt I was falling in love with these ballads, these sea ballads of broken-hearted women left shoreside. And I actually fell in love with a sailor. He was in the Royal Navy, an officer in the Royal Navy, and I felt so left behind. I felt like I was reliving this reality of these women being left behind. But I thought, oh, he's away in Hawaii having the best time ever. And I want to experience that. So I just applied to the Merchant Navy, which isn't military. So there's also civilian shipping. People get confused with this. The Merchant Navy is civilian shipping, so it's everything that's not military. So ferries, container ships, oil tankers, tugboats. And I got a cadetship on oil tankers. And so I just went away to sea. And it was actually the best thing that I could do, because musically, years later, now that I'm re-performing and writing my own songs, it's just been such a deep well of inspiration. And I think I actually thought, like yourself, that I was going to have a hiatus and a break. And it was permanent to stop doing music altogether. But when you're on the tankers, for example, there's constant rhythms. You're always moving with the sea, and there's rattling and there's echoing and there's the drone of various engines and things. If you're musically minded, you can't sit still and just not create tunes and music in your head. So even that in itself was a huge inspiration. And I ended up leaving after 8 years at sea with a whole wad of songs wedged into my notebook. But I just had to do something with.
That's so inspiring. Thank you. It's amazing to hear of a modern day version of the sea song sort of inspiration, because we associate this with something that happened 100 years ago. But even as recently as the 60s and 70s, some of my favorite writers have been in the Navy and writing, and some of my favorite singers, Cyril Tawney, for instance, has done a lot of folk music, Tom Lewis, and it's just great to hear that this still happens, not just 40 years ago, but to this very day, and it's going to keep happening. And thank you for the introduction about what the Merchant Navy is, because I agree, a lot of people get confused by that. It's perhaps a strange term, but to know that they offer these cadetships and that people can then have a great experience there, grow themselves, and then move into music is really inspiring. Thank you.
Yeah, and actually what's really great about the Merchant Navy is that, I don't mean to sell it, but you get everything paid for, like, it's a cadetship, so you get paid from day one of training. After your 3 years of training, you actually get 6 months off a year. So any musicians that are struggling, that feel like they need to have something to fund them, you could go and do this career and then basically work at sea and then on your time off tour, because your time is your own. And you can see the world through it. So it is a really good opportunity.
Brilliant. So I want to ask you now briefly about your time at the Isle of Wight. You did the Harp on Wight Festival last year, I think. How did you enjoy the visit there? I've spent a bit of time on that island myself, and just interested in your perspective.
Yeah, it's one of these things where that tour last year, it was in October, and I started off in Isle of Lewis and then did gigs en route to Isle of Wight. So I named it the Isle to Isle tour. So it was a hefty amount of miles that I covered, and it was really nice to see Isle of Wight, which is actually a much more bustling place than the rural, rugged Croftland, which I'm really familiar with on Isle of Lewis. It's actually very cosmopolitan, like certain parts of Isle of Wight. And of course, you've got the palace there as well, that I went swimming in at. So like Queen Victoria, I went for a swim, which felt kind of posh. And being half Indian as well, I think that palace was really an eye-opener for me, because obviously you hear about the Koh-i-Noor diamond and all these other artifacts that are taken from India, but the backstory there and actually seeing it in person, like the portraits of the Punjabi people that lived there, it was a real eye-opener, and it felt really actually not so long ago, and I felt really like I could relate to my heritage is Punjabi. So that was an amazing experience for me. But also musically, people love the fact that you're going to the island. So if you like the gig I did, it was fully packed, and I think all of the gigs were, all the concerts that they were putting on, and what people were coming up to me saying, there was loads of people buying merchandise as well. They just really wanted to support you because you were making the effort to come to the island, which felt really, really special.
Yeah. The first time I visited there for an extended 2-week stay, it struck me that they seem to have gigs happening every day of the week, and like 5 different gigs to choose from. There was a very passionate, homegrown music scene there, but they all kind of know each other, and what they really crave is outsiders coming in and teaching them something new. So it's a really inviting place for musicians to tour. And every time we've played festivals there, Best of All, the Isle of Wight Festival, we've got that sense as well that there's such an appetite for us. So I hope you get to visit again, and maybe we can even collaborate there, because I've started to create a base there and create a little recording studio there. So
Brilliant.
yeah,
Cool. So where are you based then? Because what is your accent?
Oh, I'm from South Africa originally.
Ah, right.
I learned some of the folk guitar styles there before then, in an unplanned kind of way, moving to the UK. I had a year to spend as part of my dad's sabbatical research, which was based in Oxford. I was never meant to stay in England. It was meant to go back to South Africa, but we'd ended up staying, and so I found myself as a sort of lonesome teenager with no roots, and Oxford provided a similar invitation to what you experienced on the Isle of Wight. Oxford has such a rich, inviting music scene that I was
Yeah.
able to find a new sort of family and home there, and I joined bands, and that's still where I really call home in a way, although I've spent a few years in London trying to learn a bit about the music industry as well.
Oh,
And
yeah.
but our band's spread all over the place. So Brian lives in the Gower Peninsula in Wales, and it's yeah, we're all over the place. But we have a tour that we haven't announced yet. It's going to bring us back together, and that's what we always love to do. I noticed you're touring in June, right? So a few different folk venues, and I'm hoping I
Yeah.
could come along to some of that. So Cecil Sharp House in London would be a real highlight of that itinerary, but you've got the
Yeah.
other dates as well.
Yeah, so it was quite exciting. So this tour will be through Showcase Scotland, which is also the reason why I'm getting to do Manchester Folk this year as well. And I'm going I'm performing alongside Heisk, which is a really great all-girl band that do lots of upbeat tunes. And then I think we're playing Brett Fortin on the 24th of June, London, like you say, on the 25th, Shoreham by Sea at Rope Tackle Art Centre. Now that's a name after my own heart. I feel like
Yes.
that's a really good one. And so that's on the 26th, and then Masham. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. 27th of June at Masham Town Hall, which I think is in the north somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, for some reason I thought your accent was maybe a wee bit Welsh.
Yeah, well, it's a strange fusion. So coming from South Africa, but with a quarter Welsh, quarter Scottish, quarter Irish, and a quarter English. So when I arrived here, I just felt like I I could belong if I tried hard enough, and eventually music was the thing that gave me a route back to each of those kind of origins. So I love to learn a Scottish reel or two, and then I like to get the bouzouki out and do the Irish ones. So that I'll be taking my bouzouki out to St. Patrick's Night tonight.
Fantastic, yeah. The only time I've been, we actually sailed into Simonstown, so that's the only part of South Africa that I know.
Okay.
But I would love to go back and see more.
Yes, that's on the west side of the country, not too far from Cape Town, and that side tends to be more Xhosa heritage or Khoisan heritage. My background was really more on the east side and the Zulu folk music. So there I learned Maskanda guitar styles, and that's the part of the country where bands like Ladysmith Black Mambazo come from. They sing a isicathamiya vocal style, which was very important in the political change that we saw in South Africa. So yeah, it's a whole rich array of styles there. So I grew up knowing a bit about the music styles of that country, and then one of my ways of trying to ingratiate myself here was to try and learn as much of the UK's folk music as possible. And I've actually the reason I'll be at Manchester Folk Festival on Friday performing is my solo project is 365 days of folk. I tried to learn a folk song every day of the year, and that took in a whole bunch of Scots, Welsh, Irish. I learned a bit of Gaelic for that. I've actually carried it on through, and today is day 442, I think. So yeah, so I'll be coming up to say hi to you and ask you what your favorite folk songs are that I can learn.
Cool. I'll try and catch your set as well. But is it songs that you're focusing on, or is it tunes?
Always songs. Yes,
songs
although,
are
the name of the project, I guess, doesn't say song in it, so it wouldn't have to be. I could extend it, and that would make it life easier if I could just do a quick jig or reel on one of those days when I don't have that much time. In fact, I noticed you've got this song. Is it Young Amy? Young Amy was the name of the single, right? That for me resonated because there's a song I learned from Paul Brady from Ireland called Edmund in the Lowlands. or Edmund in the Loneliness Low, but it's pretty much the same narrative, and some of the lines are exactly the same. But I loved how you reworked that to be so much more about female agency and just told from a different, more modern perspective. And
Yeah, I mean, it was actually it's not actually not something that I've worked in deliberately. It was from Tober and Dolchus, so it was a really old Scots recording of a guy singing, and the lyrics I actually just I learned them word for word, just to keep that Scots tradition alive. And as a songwriter, I write my own songs, obviously, but I really do enjoy revisiting these old Scots songs and finding links between modern day maritime sector and hundreds of years ago. So that was it's something that I really enjoy doing. And a lot of these stories can still be there's something about it that you can still resonate with me as a seafarer today. And I think that that's sometimes lost with certain ballads, but I think maritime, it hasn't evolved that much. And there's another song I do which it's like it's a version of a Sandy Denny in Fairbrook Convention do I can't remember, is it Sailor's Life?
oh yeah, I love that song.
Yeah.
I actually learned that for my project 1 month ago. I think I was feeling inspired by Sandy Denny herself and her whole story, and that specific song felt like the best one to learn. So I think it's still there. The thing about this project, though, is I learn a song, and then because there's so many now, it kind of goes out.
To go through it, yeah, exactly. But I again found a version, like an old Scots recording on Tober and Dolchus, and it was, the title is actually "Sailing's a Weary Life," which was slightly different, but it's basically the same story. And I learned that song at around about the same time as my first trip to sea as a third officer, and I just joined cruise ships, and we were alongside Dunedin, and obviously I was excited. We were doing the South Pacific. It was like a Circle Pacific cruise, so we were getting to see everything, all of the countries in the Pacific. So I was kind of at a high, but then tragedy struck, and we had this really avoidable, that's what made it so sad, a really avoidable accident happened on board. Basically, maintenance hadn't been carried out, and we lost a young man at sea. And he left behind his children and his wife in the Philippines. And it was just devastating. I think that was probably one of the most miserable trips I've ever had at sea, and it still kind of haunts me today. But when I hear that song and just the heartbreak that's left behind, the sad matter of the facts is that the modern day seafarer is still, it's a dangerous job, and I think that it's still very applicable, that story, to today. And I think also there's not been as many advances in the sector for the merchant navy or just mariners in general. The safety aspect is still very reactionary to accidents like this that happen, rather than actually precautionary. So after this happened, they did a big change of these gas canisters that hadn't wanted basically exploded, and then it was made safe, but it was too late. You've lost someone. So it's just really frustrating, I think, as a young officer, when you go in with ideals and you realize just how flippant big corporations are with seafarers' lives.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that insight. It's obviously a story that so many people just never get to encounter. But yeah, and the other thing that maybe is closer to home and of a similar kind of tragedy is just I've been really moved learning songs about drownings, people who think they're going to go for a fun swim, and then it turns out to be the wrong tidal time or much colder than they anticipate. And the sea is a dangerous place. And yeah, I wish there was more proactivity in trying to protect people from that.
Yeah.
It's just even the simple idea of knowing whether you're swimming at a low ebb or at a potential rip current time of day, that feels like such a basic. And I wish there was maybe some technology that could help people have a flag or a chart to know wherever they are. I guess the smartphone starts to help with that, but then they come with their own risks. But just thank you very much for that sentiment and that insight.
Yeah, sorry, it was a bit of a dark turn for our podcast. But
well, that's what folk music is for, right? It helps
yeah.
us, reminds us that of the more sort of gritty parts of life.
Yeah, and I think it resonates with people. Like, you know, I sometimes feel guilty sharing these things on stage, because I do think that it brings, you know, it's sad. It is sad and it's traumatic. But you know, I was at Signet Festival last year. So you know, on the other side of the world in Tasmania, and I sang this song and told the story. And afterwards, a lady, a mother, came up to me and said, that was what happened to my son, and it was a completely avoidable accident. He was a chief engineer on board a ship, and he passed away. And it was really therapeutic hearing you sing and tell this story and kind of like recognize the memory in the story and raise awareness, because I think that a lot of the time people don't really know about us, like the merchant mariners. They know about the Royal Navy, but they don't know about the hard work that goes in behind the scenes of, you know, day-to-day shipping. And so yeah, it was worthwhile to have that kind of, you know, make that connection with people.
Yeah. Oh, you've really inspired me now to go revisit some of the Navy songs, and something like the Grey Final Line has been a favorite for me. I'm going to go and listen to that after this. I'd like to ask you a bit about conservation of traditions now, and so maybe firstly, I wanted to mention, just see if you recognize this name, because it's an artist who has conserved Punjab styles, because she grew up there as well, but is half English, and I wonder if you've come across her, Tanya Wells.
No, I actually haven't come across her, no.
I think you'd really enjoy her music. Tanya was a supporter of the band for a long time, and even joined us on stage once or twice. And with her twin sister, Nikki Wells, who also grew up in India, they've studied a lot of the ghazals, which are a particular kind of North Indian and almost Kashmiri, Pakistani singing style. I'll have to send you some of her music. But I asked that as an introduction into this question about taking an old traditional style, maybe vocal style, writing style, harp style, and doing something new with it. What would be your favorite example, Chloe? Something to tell the listeners about where we blend the old and the new. So fanning the flames of tradition, but creating space for innovation.
I think for me, it's always a bit of a sore point to talk about Punjabi music and things, because when my dad, who's Punjabi, fell in love with my Welsh white mother, he basically got disowned from his family for a while. And so when I was an infant, and for most of my childhood, I actually didn't have that connection with the Indian side, but it's been something that I've been so fascinated with. And it wasn't until my early teenage years that I basically reconnected with that side of the family. And actually a part of that was my auntie, who I'm very close with now, so my dad's sister. She has spent months teaching me, you know, Punjabi cooking, Ayurvedic remedies. I listened to a lot of the music that my cousins perform, and she gifted me my grandfather's harmonium, which he used to play at the Sikh temple. And so I've actually incorporated that into my Scottish trad kind of songwriting. And last year I released my first single with it, which was quite a modern take on a traditional instrument which is traditionally used in the temple from Punjabi people. And I wrote a sailor's prayer. So again, it's like going back to this, trying to keep alive. You know, years ago, folk musicians would be working, they would then sing about the work that they did. And these days it feels like a lot of musicians, they do it for the passion of the music rather than to narrate the working conditions. So I thought, as a working seafarer, I would narrate the conditions, and I created this seafarer's prayer with the harmonium. And again, it was kind of keeping alive the worship side, because it's almost like a prayer for the seafarers. And then it's also, you know, paying homage to past seafarers, because something that you notice when you're sailing, you know, even if you're a yachty or whatever, you look at the charts and you can see all these wreck marks everywhere, and you start thinking about how easy it was to just sink in back in the day, and that you were actually sailing over all of your colleagues, all your comrades, like they're all at the bottom of the sea, forgotten about. And it was, a lot of the time we would sail over these wreck marks, and as crew you start chatting about it, and it's just a way to recognize that these people were lost at sea. But in my own small way, as a folk musician, I've kind of kept alive that tradition of paying homage to them.
Yeah, great, thank you very much. That's I can't wait to check out that single. That's a really interesting answer, and none of my guests to date have quite taken the response to that question out over into the sea. So it's really refreshing take on it. I think it's an easy way to then also ask you the second conservation question. So the title of the podcast series is Conservation Conversations. A lot of people assume that that's going to be about biodiversity and nature and wildlife, and that's what this next question will be about. So we've talked about conservation of music, but the fact that the sea is a whole ecosystem, I wonder if that's brought you any fascinating moments and stories that you can tell us. Just one example where nature affected the way you enjoyed music, maybe seabird life or anything like that. But where did nature get involved in your creating of music?
Yeah, so that's like a very inspiring question for me, and how to cram this into a short, narrative, because I've written songs about seabirds, and there's one that I've reflected long distance relationships with the Arctic tern, which also does long distance relationships and meets up in the same place every year and does this ritualistic dance. So I've written a song about the Arctic tern, which is called The Arctic Terns. But I think I really want to focus on today the single that I've just written and released today. So it's on Bandcamp today, but it'll be on all streaming platforms on the 27th, and it's called Peat Fires. And this for me is very much about conservation of the generational wealth of the use of the land here on Isle of Lewis. And something that I've really noticed is that whenever I move house, I meet the old folk that live around the place, and you have this huge sense of their presence with the land, the way they've worked the land, how the kind of croftland here is all shared. We've got common grazings that we can all use, which is how the UK used to be. This kind of respectful, we all share it. It's kept as croftland. I own a croft, but I don't technically own the croft. I don't own the land. That's how it should be. In the UK, I just feel like we've lost commons, and even more recently, Kate Middleton and her husband, the royal family, have taken more of our commons so that they could have bigger grounds for their palace. And it's just that taking this land from the people to build and make it industrial. And I think that for me, it's, what's so beautiful about Isle of Lewis is the fact that there is this relationship, this really traditional relationship of the people and the land. And that song in particular, it's also about like the personality of each croft house, which is basically based on the land. And just how I kind of explored that moving into this house. A famous Gaelic singer used to live in this house. And you can sense it somehow. Maybe that sounds a bit wacky, but you really can. You can just sense that there's been music here. And it's also almost like the land sings. So when you go out, of course, you've got the wind here, the northerly wind, and you're completely exposed to the elements here, which is very much like being at sea. So like the ships used to sing, I feel like the land here sings, and there's always noise and there's always movement. And for me, that's something that I really want to capture through my music, is this kind of presence and the magic of the land, which I think a lot of people are not being able to respect anymore. But as musicians, as folk musicians, I feel like we get it. I've not met a folk musician that doesn't get it. But the population in the whole, I just feel we're losing this kind of sense of magic and connection to the land.
Thank you. What an inspiring answer. That's something that we've been writing about for a long time as well. Stornoway have a song, We Are the Battery Human, which is about how people turn into essentially battery hens as we just sit in our boxes in our houses, sort of on our screens all day. And the antidote to that is to go outside and appreciate, reconnect to the land and to people around us. So yeah, it sounds like we've got a lot in common. And everybody in the audience, I can see we've got an unusually big audience today. Thank you for being here. That single that Chloe's just described. So Peat Fires, that's out in just 3 days' time, Friday 20th, and make sure you go pre-save your copy, grab your copy, and
I actually accidentally released it on Bandcamp for
oh, good. Okay.
It's out now, so go and check it out.
Go grab it. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thanks so much, Chloe. It's been a real insight and fascinating to talk to you, and I can't wait to meet in Manchester this weekend.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it'll be a pleasure because I really do love you guys. Your music is fantastic. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, everybody, that's the final episode in this series of the Conservation Conversations, but I'll be back tomorrow with a new series. So we're going to be interviewing a lot of conservationists in the coming months, people who are hands-on getting involved with biodiversity, conservation initiatives, and their conservation societies. So you'll hear from writers, illustrators, fundraisers, and people who go in and create habitats and maintain habitats. So starting tomorrow with Joe Wimperney, who's a brilliant author and a supporter of the band. Just my huge thanks again to Chloe Matharu for joining us, and to everyone who's tuned in. We'll see you later. Take care.
Thanks.